Good morning, everybody. My name is John Miller with Lead2Goals. I wanted to just take a quick moment to welcome you to this month's presentation on leading effective meetings. I can see by the registration notes that a few of you have joined us before, so thanks for coming back again. And for those of you joining us for the first time, I'd like to take a minute to introduce our presenter, Scott De Long. Scott has been an entrepreneur his entire life. He started his first business at age 16 and then went on to create and successfully exit 2 other businesses during his career. They were all bootstrap organizations that he built from the ground up himself with no outside investment. Scott also holds a doctorate in leadership studies, which does provide him with a unique combination of the theoretical knowledge and the practical application from his business experience. His passion lies in helping companies work with their executives to rid themselves of some old and outdated management beliefs, and in the end, understand and appreciate and master a leader's mindset. His promise to his clients is that the techniques he coaches will not only bring tremendous benefits to their professional lives, but also extend to the whole person and offer some benefits to their personal lives as well. So with that being said, here's Scott De Long.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. This meeting is, or this webinar is on leading effective meetings. And it's one of my favorite topics because when I go in and usually consult with organizations, it is probably the thing that I hear the most from the people is that we have too many meetings around here. And so then the first thing I do is I start exploring what those meetings look like and who's in attendance and how they're operated and actually the work and the flow of those. And what I've noticed was that it's not that they have too many meetings, is that some people are invited to too many meetings, but generally what I find is that their meetings suck. They just lack the things that are necessary in order to make a good meeting. So this is a very, very short presentation, probably 35 to 45 minutes of me gabbing and talking, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers and at the end. One of the things that I notice when we're doing this is that when you come to one of our webinars and it says it's 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, we start on time. I know a lot of people come late because they don't want to hear the first nonsense or, hey, we're going to wait 3 or 4 minutes for other people to show up. But that's one of the things that I do in my meetings. And one of the best practices is that start on time and finish on time. If I start setting expectations that we're going to wait 3 or 4 minutes for people to show up or those sorts of things, that people will take those 3 or 4 minutes and not waste their time getting on time. And I'm wasting the people who did have the courtesy to show up on time. The other reason that I do that is, and I don't go back and revisit this either, is that if you've missed the first 3 or 4 minutes, you've missed something. That's on you. So I'm training you to show up on time. I'm not talking about this webinar as much as I'm talking about generally in meetings, but I'm going to treat this meeting very similar to a webinar, or this webinar very similar to the meeting structure. So I don't believe that most organizations have too many meetings. They might not have great purpose for them, and we'll go into some of those things as we get through on what makes an effective meeting and how to organize those. But what I find is that people just don't have very good meetings. Nothing gets done. So one of the things that we want to definitely understand is why we're meeting. I've seen a ton of people having meetings to make a report. Here's a status update. Here's what we're doing. I got a quote, and this isn't 100%, right? I got a quote that I used and I said, hey, if you're just going to make a report, send me a report. I know how to read. We don't need to spend 8 people, 10 people, 12 people together in a room just to hear something that they can all read in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So the purpose of meetings has to go bigger than that. It is to collaborate. It is to get people's ideas together. Challenge my ideas. If I'm the leader of the meeting, I'm looking for people to challenge my ideas. Another thing that is for is to educate. there may be some times that we put people together in a meeting that we are going to, in fact, this webinar is a good example. We're going to educate people on how to make a good meeting, for instance, right? But I think the education needs to go further than just me sitting up here giving a speech to everybody as well. There's something that we do in the courses that we teach that we call a reverse classroom. And in a reverse classroom, while the teacher may put out the content and ask people to be prepared for that, it's really the people in the audience, the students, that become the teachers. Their interpretation of the information that we've provided them to look at, and any other additional research that they've brought in besides what it is that we've provided them, is really what helps educate everybody. We don't all see things alike. Seeing things from different points of view, we don't all hear the same language. So me saying something and then somebody else saying it in a different way is going to get to more people than just me saying it and dictating and going on. So the education is a two-way process. And then the last one is to inform. There are some meetings where we just give some status updates. Here's the things we're doing. Again, but that's not supposed to be a one-way communication. The information type meetings are for people to be able to ask clarifying questions, to understand the information, the why behind the information. So these are the three reasons that I think we should have meetings, and I think we should have them frequently. They don't always have to be long, but what we're trying to do with a meeting is collaborate, educate, inform, and really improve communication within the organization. For each meeting, the first thing that I want to do is determine the purpose. It's what do I want? What am I looking for out of this? What do I want for the others? And probably even more important, especially as you're beginning this process, what do I want for the relationship? If I am looking to create a top-down dictatorial style command and control leadership process, I'm going to stand up on a podium and I'm going to dictate down to the masses. Not the kind of organization I'm looking for. So the relationship becomes really important. And I believe in transformational leadership, and there's a whole process about that. I'm writing a book about it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But part of that process is to get people to challenge the process, challenge the statements, challenge the ideas that are coming up, because your challenges only make me smarter. I believe strongly in this. We are smarter than me. And I'll say that on almost every one of these webinars. The collective mindset of the people around us are far more intelligent than anything I can come up with by myself. And that applies to all of us. You could be the smartest person in the room, but you're not smarter than the collective. Just the way it works. And why wouldn't we want to encourage the collective to bring their thoughts and ideas rather than stifle those ideas? So it does several things. One, it makes our ideas better, but two, it builds relationships between people that are able to communicate with each other. One of the prerequisites for this, though, is the ability to create what's called psychological safety. Psychological safety is really a four-step process, but it gets down to this. People feel safe to be able to speak up, to be able to make a comment, to be able to ask what some might consider a dumb question. I don't think there are dumb questions. That's kind of a cliche answer. People ask questions because they want to hear the answer, because they want to know what you're thinking about the answer. It may be dumb to you or others about that, but they don't know, and that's why they're asking, whether it's your point of view or understand the information or whatever it might be. The ability to create that psychological safety is a forebearer into building any relationship that's based on trust. Whole process about that. We've got courses on it and all that. So we can talk about that at any time as well. Hey, just an instance, during the presentation, go ahead and take notes. And if there's things that you have questions about, write them down and save them for the end, or you can put them in the chat box. And then John will read your questions at the end as well. If you're too shy, let's call it shy, to turn your video on and ask the question. But it's really, these really become interactive when you are asking questions about the things that I'm saying. All right, so here's a problem that I find in most organizations is who should attend. Meetings get bigger and bigger and bigger, and a lot of people aren't adding value to those meetings. All right. So why are they invited? Well, because we don't want to leave anybody out. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to, whatever it's going to be. But a meeting, if these meetings are the time suck that people say they are, why would you want to be invited to several meetings that you have no interest in, you have nothing to add? So the first thing that I want to do when we walk into an organization is determine who should attend which particular meetings. Invite only the people that should be there. Only those that are going to be attentive and active in the discussion. I remember a meeting that I had in an organization that I was running that was bi-coastal, and we invited some people out from Florida to our California office, and one of the managers asked for her supervisor to come along too because she didn't want to have her left out of the discussion. And I said, that's great, as long as she plans on participating. She's welcome to come. We'll fly her out if she has something to bring to the table. But to sit in the back of the room just to be included, it's really a waste. It's a waste of time, money, resources, all of those things. And it adds to the thought process within the organization that we have too many meetings around here. If you're inviting people that don't need to be there, you're going to stop inviting them. Now, there's a nice way of doing that disinviting. You don't just cut people off and not let them know why, but you have a conversation and see if they want to be there, if they can add value and all that, you bring them in. When you find out that they're not adding value, then we can do one-on-one conversations and saying, hey, well, here's the problem that I'm seeing. You've come to the meeting, you're sitting there with your arms crossed, you're not adding anything. Why do you want to be there? And get those kind of questions to them and get them talking about it. One of two things will end up happening. Either they will start participating or they will gladly be asked to be removed from the distribution list on the meeting. So something to pay attention to is who's there and who shouldn't be there anymore. So there's my group, a partner and I do something every week. It's called the CEO podcast. It's conversations with entrepreneurs about opportunity. And we did a specific podcast, about a half hour long, on the best practices for leading a virtual meeting. We've all gotten a little better at it, but we're not great at it yet. So if you're interested in podcasts, get your phone out, scan the QR code here. That'll take you right to the podcast. Hit save and listen to that. If you like podcasts, this is an opportunity. It doesn't cost anything. It's just like more content, more ways of getting involved and hearing different points of view. So now as the organizer of the meeting, it is my job to organize my content up front and be prepared. So sometimes that's to have reports ready. Sometimes it's to have a PowerPoint ready. Generally in small meetings, I'm not a big fan of PowerPoints because I want people looking at people instead of some big screen, but there's a reason to have a PowerPoint available. Like for instance, this wouldn't go nearly as well if we didn't have a PowerPoint, to have bullet points and things like that. And learning how to create a good PowerPoint is an art in itself as well. You'll see that when we do ours, John makes our PowerPoints for us. We don't put too much information on it. Most of the information is done verbally. But these are the points that I want people to remember. Get your reports ready, get your memos ready, create your PowerPoint, a list of potential questions that you think people might ask. That way you can be prepared for the answers that you would be willing to give, or leave it up to the room to give the answers, certainly. The other part of this is to then create an agenda. With this agenda, it's not just to say from 10 o'clock to 10:05, we're going to be doing introductions, and 10:05 to 10:09, we're going to be distribute the report. Sure, that's important, and that's good to let people know what's coming up. But the reason that I want to have an agenda is so that I can send it out to people in advance so that they can be prepared to talk about the things that I need them to talk about. Listen, if I didn't need you to talk about stuff, I wouldn't invite you to my meeting. We wouldn't be there. You'd be one of the disinvited people if I didn't want your input. So why not let you know what the meeting is going to be about and generally what the agenda is going to look like. I'm not a real stickler on the to-the-minute type agendas and keeping on track because I want the conversation to go where it needs to go. What I am a stickler on is the start time and the end time. There may be some meetings, and this is going to be an example of one, that there is an end time. It's, it's 10:45 Pacific time. We're going to end this thing. And then people can drop off. But I will also let people know that I'll stick around for some conversation afterwards if they want to do that. And if I have time to do that in a meeting, I'll let people know afterwards as well that, hey, we want to keep this thing flowing. We can continue to talk. So setting the time expectations. There's a trick that most of us have. You know what? I'm going to ask for a favor here. I want to have 10 volunteers. Right now, I only have one, and that's Lachelle, who has her video on. Lachelle, thank you for doing that. I'm watching your head go up and down and nodding and smiling when I see that. I would like to get 10 volunteers to turn their video on. And if you all do, that's great, but I want to get 10. Let's just to see. This is going to go into the how to facilitate a remote meeting concept, right? And again, if I'm telling you that my meetings are two-way, it's not just me sitting up here lecturing, it's really important for me to see who's getting it and who's not. And I can do that if I'm paying attention. Now, when we have 40, 50 people on like this, it's more difficult to see all the facial reactions, certainly, but I can see movement. And when I see some movement, now I start looking at the picture. So Nick, I can see you're intently staring at the screen right now to see what we're talking about. That's important to me as a facilitator. I want to facilitate, not dictate. You want to become a transformational leader? Facilitate, don't dictate. So if I see things that spark interest in you or concern or conflict, it's an opportunity to bring it up and say, hey, I see something's going on. What do you think? What are you thinking right now? All right. And get some of that engagement. We're going to go back at the end of this and talk a little bit more about why I want the cameras on. But for me as a facilitator is really what I am. I've been a CEO and I've been all kinds of things, but what I really like being is a facilitator and getting people talking to each other. It is really important for me to see the reactions of the people that I'm talking to. Frankly, I prefer face-to-face meetings because now I can watch the whole body language as opposed to just facial reactions, nods and smiles and quizzical looks and all those sorts of things you can read on the face. But the body language can tell so much about what's happening as well. Watching people fidget underneath the desk or rubbing their hands on their pants or whatever it might be are clues that you can pay attention to in person that you just can't hear on something like Zoom. Okay, so beyond the agenda, I think the room setup is important as well. And this happens to be in a face-to-face meeting I'm talking about, although the room setup in Zoom becomes synonymous. I mean, you have to do some things to make the Zoom thing work as well. But what I want to do is I want to check the audio and visual. If I'm going to have a PowerPoint, does it work? Do I know how to click the button and is it this little clicker working and all that? Because guess what? I can't just blame the AV guy. It's my meeting and I'm holding it. You're going to hold me responsible if things aren't working. I want things to be able to go smooth so that we don't have to stop, hold, wait, work on things that have nothing to do with the flow of the meeting that we're in. All those things distract from the attention that we're supposed to be providing to the content. Here's an interesting thing as well that I learned from an associate, and that is to eliminate unnecessary chairs. We're sitting around a boardroom and there's 10 chairs, but there's only 8 of us in the meeting. Take 2 of those chairs away from the table. It's kind of a subliminal suggestion that there's something missing. An empty chair symbolizes something missing, whether that's energy or flow or experience or whatever it's going to be. So setting up the room makes sense to make the flow better, right? And if there's 8 people in a 10 chairs laying around, there's something missing, and that's what goes in the back of folks' mind. So just move the chairs out. That's part of it as well. Having your flip charts, whiteboards, virtual whiteboards, all of that available and working. I go as far as to make sure the little marking pens that I use actually work, or the Post-it notes aren't old and they actually will stick up on the wall that I placed them up on the wall. And if not, I'll have some tape with me, right? those are all distractions that we don't need. Those are distractions that you see every day in meetings that take away from the meeting, take additional time, you don't get as much done, and people think the organization just sucks. It just doesn't flow well. As the leader here, it's important to recognize my role. Remember, facilitate, don't dictate. Said that a little bit earlier. My role is to get people talking to each other, getting the flow of ideas out of the room. So in my professional life now, I work with organizations and I do strategic planning events and things like that. And I don't call myself a consultant. I do not come in and tell people how to run their business, what needs to be fixed. I believe that the answer's in the room. It's my job as a facilitator to get the answer out of the smart people that are sitting around that room. The same holds true if I work within the organization. Why do I have a team of people working with me? Whether it's a cross-functional team, somebody from sales, somebody from finance, somebody from operations, or if it's within my own, let's say I'm in the sales department, all the salespeople together. The reason that I have them there is because we are smarter than me. I want to facilitate the discussion, the conversation, and getting people to talk. Prior to that, in order to get them to feel talk, back to the psychological safety, I need to make people feel welcome. One of the things I'll do differently than most folks, let's say I'm in charge of a group. Rarely will I sit at the head of the table, even if I'm the boss. I want to sit personally, I want to sit in the middle of the table. Why? Because I want people from this side and from this side to both have equal opportunity to speak instead of me coming down on them. Prior to that, even though, when I'm holding an in-person meeting, I'm going to stand up and greet people, shake everyone's hand standing up, not sitting down and waving and that sort of thing. Now, I get it with the COVID and all that, handshaking has changed a little bit the way that it used to be, but getting up and making people feel welcome as they're entering into the room. The hardest thing to do, and you'll see when we get to the questions and answers period, the hardest thing to do in a meeting is to get somebody else to talk first. Everyone has something to say. They all want to say something. The way to get people to talk is to get them talking as they enter into the room. Hey, how are you doing? Glad you can make it. Doug, thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. How's your day today? Get them speaking. Just something innocuous, right? Just get them used to speaking in the room in front of other people. And it's going to make the question and answer period easier as we go forward. It's going to make the collaboration piece easier. We won't just see sitting back waiting for others to speak first. Okay. Special offer for folks that are here. We do workshops. This is more like a keynote kind of a presentation. It's half workshop, half keynote. But we do a 2.5-hour live online workshop on this. We normally charge $400. If you are interested in finding out more exercises, collaboration, all kinds of things that we can do and set up, we're offering a special price here. If you book today or tomorrow, I think 24 hours, John, is what you have it set up for. You can get that for $99. It's 2.5 hours. It's real intense. There's a lot of work. There's exercises. There's things that you can take away that you can go to work for. Go ahead and scan the QR code if you want. And if not, send us an email and we'll tell you when it's going to be. But that's just the shameless plug right there to get people into the system. So meeting format. So now I've invited the right people. I've done my homework. I've got my agenda ready. Now I'm going to actually hold, and I've greeted people as they walked in the door, the room set up, all of that, right? The first thing that I start with every meeting, I start with the purpose, and I'll actually use it. The purpose of this meeting is, here's what we are hoping to come up with by the time we're done with this, so expected outcomes, right? And then, especially if it's a new group and we haven't done too much, we'll set ground rules. This part's important. The ground rules are the operating procedures that we have agreed to. And the way that I like to set ground rules is not for me to set them. It is to ask the audience, ask the group, ask the participants, what do you guys think about the use of cell phones or answering emails or eating in the meeting or drinking in the meeting or all the different things that you've seen people violate, right? One of the ground rules that I insist upon is one person speaking at a time. I mean, that's one that if they don't bring up, I will, and I'll get everyone to agree to it because they always do. The other one would be the no sidebar crosstalk kind of thing. Crosstalk can be defined two ways. One is that two people over here having a side conversation, but the other part of crosstalk that I like is you challenging me. Here's my idea. What do you think? Let's go back and forth on that for a little bit. That's okay. But the sidebar conversations really aren't. So you want to establish some ground rules. And then here's something that's also really important. And this is where a lot of leaders mess up. Let's decide up front how we're going to decide. And there's generally four ways of making decisions. There is the, I'm the boss, I've made a decision, here's what we're going to do. There is the, hey, listen, I want your input, but I'm the boss and this is going to fall on my shoulders, so I'm going to make the decision based on your input. The third way is we're going to have a vote. Majority wins, or 60% people will vote until we get to 60%, or whatever voting mechanism. I hate that one, just saying. And then the last one is the consensus. And consensus is defined as, or at least defined by me, as an outcome that we can all support. That doesn't mean everybody, we're not going to sit there like a jury and wait till we have all 12 people voting to convict or acquit, right? It is, we are going to sit there until, or postpone if we have to, until we can get everybody on board. The thing that I can't afford to have happen is that if 8 of us believe one way, and we go forward with that, so an 8-2 decision, right? And the 2 people that leave the meeting are challenging it with the rest of the organization and saying they're stupid, they're this, they're that, right? This is never going to work, and really, really destructive. So I really like consensus. The downside of consensus, and there is a downside, is it takes time. It takes more time than for me just to decide, or for you to give input and for me to decide, or for us to just have a vote. Those are pretty simple. We can do those really fast. But the difference between getting consensus and not is, if I make a decision, I can get you to agree to do it, to do the thing, because I'm paying you and you risk losing your job, or you might get a bonus, or whatever those rewards are going to be. I can get compliance from you. But when we have consensus, I get commitment. We have agreed on this. This is in their best interest, our best interest, and we get commitment out of it. So I really like the consensus. But how to decide needs to come up front. Give you an example. If Willie, if you believe that you were going to end up getting a vote on this thing, and I just made a decision, that's because I have the power to make that decision, you're going to leave upset, right? If we don't set the expectations and then meet and manage and exceed those expectations, the people whose expectations were not met are going to leave upset. Well, we go back to the relationship page. Remember that about 4 or 5 pages back, that I want to develop relationships. If you know up front, hey, this is my decision, I want your input, and I make it, you're going to be fine with that. But if you think we're going to get to consensus or a vote, and I make a decision at the end of the meeting that you weren't aware of, right, you're going to be upset. So deciding how to decide and letting people know up front. Hey, in this case right now, we're going to stay here till we get consensus. You guys all agree with that? Yep, great, let's do that, okay? And the last piece of this, and this is where people make mistakes all the time as well, is that we want to close each meeting with the assignments and what I call champions, the person responsible for that assignment, with due dates. Here's what we need, from who, by when. It's a real simple formula. Anyone ever walk out of a meeting where the leader of the meeting said, okay, what we need to do is, and they leave it at that, right? we doesn't get crap done, right? We don't do anything except talk. It is, Nick, you are responsible for this. We need this from you. Here's the due date that we're looking for. All right, here's the thing, here's the person, here's the time frame. Are you good with that? And Nick comes back and says, no, I can't do it by Wednesday, but I can get it to you by Friday. A little collaboration going on in there. Can we agree with that? Yeah, great. Now we have, here's what we need from who by when. And then hold people accountable to it. A really simple process. If we just follow this, your meetings are going to get better just by with that, right? There's going to have, here's what we need from who by when. If you're going to write anything down in this presentation, write that down. So something else we do, I can't say I like to write, but I do a lot of writing. And we've created a mini ebook, which is free for download. Basically, it is a maybe just a little more detail than this 45 minutes that we're spending here together is going to be. So if you want to get your phone out and get the QR code here, hit that. It'll ask you for your email so that we can send you a copy of the mini ebook. It's only 17 pages, I think, with some pictures and big print. It's not a difficult read at all. So it's just a free resource. If you're interested in doing that, feel free to get the QR code. And if you miss any of this because you just didn't have a chance to get your phone out, send us an email, scott@lead2goals.com. Really simple. You can ask any kind of questions you want. Whether it's
Scott, I've also added the link to the chat too.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate that, John. Honestly, it's worth the read, and we'll talk a little bit about that probably when the questions and answers come up. So real fast, real simple. Again, the 2.5 hour workshop goes into a lot more detail and gives you kind of the framework on how to do that. But it's really as simple as getting the right people in the room, knowing what you're going to talk about, having an agenda that you distribute early so that people can get prepared themselves for your meeting. Getting the room set up so that people feel welcome and it's a safe place to have the conversations, to bring up dumb ideas, to whatever that's going to be. Some of those dumb ideas turn into great ideas. So I'm looking for those when we're talking about. One of the brainstorming things is that no idea is a bad idea. If you ever got into brainstorming at all. And sometimes those wacky, wild ideas end up coming back into play somewhere, or some version of it, right? It is getting people thinking outside the box. So holding the meetings, looking for feedback, getting people to collaborate, knowing your role of facilitator, not dictator, and then closing the meeting with, here's what we need from who, by when. Any questions? Doug doesn't have any. Miles, how about you? You got any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I will say I enjoyed the content here. I mean, I've tried. I won't say that I've been on like an endless pursuit of the perfect meeting, but I've definitely read a couple of books and just kind of try to pay attention to best practices for meetings, and definitely appreciate a few of your points. And I think a lot of it is stuff that is, certainly simple and makes sense, but if I can admit, it's hard to remember these things all the time, right? Yeah. Like, hey, start the meeting with the purpose. It's like, well, shoot, I miss that all the time. I guess I probably assume that the purpose is stated in the title of the meeting or in the decision to have the meeting. But man, that can go a long way. So no, I appreciate a lot of the feedback here, and this was good.
John, did you get any questions that came up from the group?
Yeah, I did get one. Somebody's kind of funny. They go, so the meetings in my company do in fact suck.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
How do I get my bosses to implement the changes you are suggesting?
Yeah, well, so the I think that mini ebook that we have is a great document to let sit on their desk, right? just give them thought. Part of the problem that we have as bosses is this tunnel vision. We think we're doing well, right? We don't know that we're not until somebody tells us. I'm doing it because I think I'm doing it right. And so that's a starting spot. But the next thing that I would do is, if you got that boss to read that, or the leader of the meeting, or whoever, right, whoever that you wanted to put that on their desk, circle back with them afterwards and have a conversation about it, right? So it's just, we've all read books and we thought, oh, that's brilliant. And then we never implement the things. The way to get these things implemented is to have dialogue about them, sharing ideas back and forth. It cements it in their ideas. We are going to come up with a better idea than that mini ebook or that book or that podcast that you listen to, because what we're going to talk about is what works for us. Little back and forth, little debate, little collaboration on that really would be helpful. So that'd be the start. Awareness is the biggest problem that we have, the tunnel vision and the self-awareness that we just don't see. We don't see our blind sides. It's true. We need you to, I'm not gonna say call us out, but make us aware, right? If you've got a boss that's certainly not aware, the next thing I do is recommend coaching for them. But how do you get through with that? But start with little things like dropping the ebook off on their desk and then going and having a conversation with them about it afterwards.
I actually do have a question.
Sure.
Hey, Scott, thanks for the presentation. Very helpful. Where I work, we kind of distinguish between three general types of meetings. So we've got, information-based meetings that you talked about. We have strategy or brainstorming type meetings, and then we have ones that, I mean, we would call them business reviews, or ones that are a little more structured. We're moving in that direction, okay, where there's a definitive sort of decisions and agreements that have to come out of those meetings, whereas the others aren't. Do you encounter that? And when you're advising clients, how important is the objective of the meeting to some of what you were saying? Because I mean, there's some things that might vary in terms of like structure and some of these, depending on the nature of that meeting. Is that a consideration that you go through with your clients?
Yeah, I think with all three types of those meetings, Doug, that you have, there is a purpose for the meeting. Even a brainstorming session, there's a purpose for that. It's not just a bunch of idle chit chat. Sometimes meetings are to build relationships. That's the entire purpose. We're sitting here having lunch together and we're going to talk about, whatever interests you, fishing or guitars or whatever that's going to be, right? So yes, I think the purpose and the objectives are important no matter what type of meeting. How formal and how structured, that can vary a little bit based on the circumstances and what it is that you need to get out of that meeting. But you did talk the collaboration. So there's two types of collaboration meetings you mentioned in there. One was a purely open-ended brainstorming session,
yep,
right?
Yeah.
Where we diverge and get all kinds of crazy ideas, then we converge. We want to always converge on those that are realistic and practical for us at this time too. So that's the purpose of that, is even in brainstorming, is to take all the crazy ideas and bring them down to the 3 or 4 we could actually do something with. But on the strategic planning portion as well, we definitely need to get outcomes with those things, right? And I say those things up front. In fact, we're doing a strategic planning event for a group coming up, and we let them know by the end of this meeting, here is what we are going to have done. And if we don't, we create a parking lot. Things that need to be done next. And even those parking lot items get the champion. So here's what we need, which is the parking lot item, the champion, who's in charge of that, and when are we going to get back to it? Here's what we need from who by when, even on things that we have to table for this meeting, because we're here to focus on this, but a new idea came up. Let's put it in a parking lot. Okay, Doug, you're in charge of that. Can you get a meeting set up with the right players by Tuesday at 2:00, right? Very, very clear and specific. So I think they all should have purpose and objectives. I do. Otherwise, why bother, right?
Great.
And the purpose could be, again, simple as team building. I'm okay with that. In fact, I like that. Hey, I got a question for those people. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 or 8 of you that turned your cameras on, were you more involved after or before? Like we talked for about 5-10 minutes before, and you were listening. I get it. You were listening and paying attention, but was it more intense listening experience with your camera on? What do you think? A couple nods of the heads. The answer is probably, and you didn't even notice it, but right. So it's engagement, that level of engagement. It certainly helps me to have your camera on. But I believe, I don't have scientific proof on this one, but I believe that it's good for you as well. You're not going to be multitasking if your camera's on. You're not going to be diverted. You're not going to, all those kind of things, because, oh, someone's going to notice, right? But also, I know that this guy's looking at my face and my reaction. I'm going to nod when I like it, or I'm going to say, no, that's not quite right when I don't. And I think you get a little more intent. So it's not just good for the facilitator, but I think it's good for the participant to have that camera on as well. Okay, just another clue. John, did you have any more?
Yeah, we have another one. Somebody asked, what is the acceptable length of a meeting, looking at this in line with the concentration level of people?
Well, the acceptable length of a meeting is what you need to get the things accomplished done. However, there are some best practices that I can suggest for meeting length. Instead of having an hour meeting, make it a 50-minute meeting. Why? That person's got another meeting to go to, right? And let's say you do go 2 minutes long. They still have the time to get up, go to the restroom, go get a cup of coffee, do whatever they need to do before they get into the next meeting. So it's showing respect. Are you going to lose anything in those 10 minutes? The answer is no, because we are more purposeful during those 50 minutes than we would be a 60-minute. Because during that 60-minute meeting, you're starting to, now the last 5 or 10 minutes, you're starting to think about the next meeting and what you have to do and what you're missing and all those kind of things. So we lose that intensity. And here's the other key to that, is that we all work better on deadlines. When I know I only have 50 minutes to get something done, I get it done. I've got a friend who does a similar line of work that I do, working with organizations. And when people are collaborating too much and just going back and forth, and it seems to be going that aimless circle, and you've seen that happen, he'll get up and say something like, okay, you got 2 minutes and need a decision. Whether he had 2 minutes or not, that's what he will say. And guess what? A decision gets made in those 2 minutes. We start focusing on what we need to. So a 50-minute meeting instead of an hour meeting, a 25-minute meeting instead of a 30-minute meeting. There's other meetings that don't even have a time frame, that we call huddles or stand-ups. And those are meetings where we're standing up. We get in a room and we stand up and we just have a little quick discussion on things that are going on. And why do we do that? Because when you're standing, it's going to be quick. If you sit down, we're going to get relaxed. We're going to spend time. We're going to kick back. We're not going to do nearly as much. So you can have a short little stand-up meeting. The answer to the question is, as long as it's going to take to accomplish the goals. It's another reason for sending the agenda out in advance. Let's say I gave 25 minutes for a meeting, and you all knew it's going to take an hour and a half to get this done because of how much you want to bring into it. It's a great time right there to say, hey, chief, we're not going to get what you not in 25 minutes. Well, what do you mean? That's enough time to make a decision. Not with all the new information that this department has and this department has that they're wanting to bring in here. We really need to talk this through. So you can even challenge the process before the process starts. So a great reason to get that agenda out there early. You want to talk about all this in 25 minutes? Are you sure? Right? Give the person a chance to reset and relook at that. Anybody else?
Scott, we have a few more.
Okay.
Somebody else said, this is centered around team meetings. I guess, what's your opinion on how this might apply for client facing?
Well, client facing are a little more difficult because they're in charge. They're the client. However, you need to be able to take charge. You need to be able to set the agenda. And part of the way to set the agenda is asking good questions. Salespeople don't ask enough questions. They want to provide a bunch of information in a short period of time. But I've sat across from buyer's desk where they've given me 20 minutes and we've ended up taking an hour and a half because they got engaged in conversation with me because all I was doing was asking them good questions about them, their company, their needs, how we might be able to help them. And the conversation just started flowing even better. So there's another, so in a client meeting, while they're in charge, you're still bringing, if you are the salesperson, you're bringing the agenda that you need to get through. You need to try to take control, but not by controlling. You take control through the use of the agenda and the questions that you're going to be asking. This happens in one-on-one meetings as well. So you didn't go there, but I'm going to do this. So the one-on-one meeting with your direct reports or with your superior, however you're doing it, is the most important meeting of the week. Do not miss it. Do not reschedule it. Do not tell the person that they're not important, that they're not as important. The one-on-one meeting works in the same way. The purpose of the one-on-one meeting, if I'm working with one of my direct reports, the purpose of my one-on-one meeting is to get their needs met. Slightly different than the way most organizations do it. Most organizations will have a one-on-one meeting and telling somebody what they need done. Here's where you're not doing it well. Here's what we need more from you. Here's what we, right? And it is a very counterproductive way of getting that done. Well, short-term thinking. It gets what you need at that point, but it doesn't get you that relationship that we were talking about earlier. So when I hold a one-on-one meeting with a direct report, the agenda, so we both get prepared. I have a list that I get myself prepared with, and I give them a document that they could use to get themselves prepared, and we work off of their list. If that takes the entire 25 or 50 minutes that we've scheduled for it, it does, and I don't even get to mine. I have time to get to mine later. I can pick up the phone and call them. I can walk over to their desk. I can do all those things and say, oh, by the way, I need you to, start punctuating your emails better or whatever. I can always find time to do that. But when I'm doing a one-on-one meeting, it's about them and what their needs are. We'll get to mine, right? Especially if they don't have a lot. But when the first several that you're doing with them and you're finding out about them, you're going to find out more and more and more. You won't even get to your agenda at all for a while. But that's, again, the purpose of this meeting is to get the most I can out of the employees that are working for me and making sure that they're content doing it, right? That's the purpose of that meeting. And I want to get to that purpose. So I'll state that up front and I'll give them the time to do it. I went off track a little bit on that one, but it sparked something in me, John. Thanks.
All right, we got one more. Somebody said, I hate showing my face in meetings as my face is expressive. This could come across badly. Any suggestions?
Well, I've got a face like that as well. I've got a very intense face. I hate to admit this. I've admitted it before. I actually paid a coach, paid a guy, paid him $5,000 to teach me how to smile because I didn't want to always lead being intense. Right? I'm not saying go pay a coach to go learn how to do something that you need to learn how to do. But the fact is that you want, your face is expressive for a reason because there's emotions behind that. Now, in my case, it's just kind of had this square jaw, intense look about me and I couldn't get rid of, and I have these eyes that pierce and do all those kind of things. So I had to learn how to smile because I want to be welcoming, as I mentioned in one of the earlier slides. So the answer is I still want your camera on. I need to find out what your expressions are. If I'm saying something that you absolutely hate and you don't speak up, with your camera on, I can see it and ask. Tell me a little bit about what's going on, where it might be. So I'm not one of holding back emotions. So I think if you have an expressive phrase, good for you. Wear it. It's okay. Now, do we need to adjust from time to time? Do I look angry when I'm really happy? Yeah, I get that sometimes. So I have to work on that. So there's a little self-reflection and work on some things. But the fact of the matter is the reason that I want your camera on is so I can see those expressions. So I wouldn't shy away from it at all. Anybody else?
That's all the questions we have.
Okay, so a couple more things before we wrap up. Our business development guy is available for needs analysis. If anyone ever has any of that, or shoot me an email. I'll email in email questions as well. But if you want a free 15-minute analysis on if there's something that we can do to help, great, do that. It doesn't cost you anything. You might be able to learn something in the process as well. And who knows, maybe we can do some good for each other. So scan that code if you like. And if not, shoot me off an email. And then one last thing, I'm going to ask a favor of this group. So I'm in the middle of writing a book. Well, I'm about 80% done right now. And part of this process is once I've written my rough draft and I send it to my editor and it comes back a little bit softer version of that, I asked 5 or 6 people from the world, right, whether they're business associates or whatever, to critique a chapter. Here you go. Read this chapter and tell me what you think. What'd you like? What didn't you like is probably more important than what you did like out of it, right? Critiquing it. And if anybody wants to critique a chapter of my upcoming book, I would love to exchange with you. So it's a real simple thing. Shoot me off an email, scott@lead2goals.com. And the chapter that I'm on right, that's ready to be critiqued is on teams. We're down here in the last group now with humility, empathy, and vulnerability in the writing process on that. But the teams chapter we need to go back and get some critique. If you're interested in reading how I write and want to, throw darts at me, this would be a good opportunity to do that. But only ask if you're willing to give me the feedback. I mean, like seriously, that chapter is probably going to take about a half an hour to read. And then, whatever you like and didn't like about it. I'm not asking for editing. I'm not asking for, hey, commas out of place and period, all those things. It's concept, right? Did the concept land? What was missing from it? Would have made it better for you? That sort of thing. Or where do you think I was totally off base is fine as well. So if you're interested in that, shoot me off an email. We can exchange and I'll send you a copy of a chapter. First edited chapter, right? We're going to go back at the end and take all the comments and revise to make sure that we get the audience down right. But these are the chapters of the book. It's on transformational leadership, theory, practice, and principles. And the one that we're working on this week, if you're interested, is teams. So I wanted our next event is going to be turning a group into a team. And the line that I use is that all teams are made of groups, but not all groups make a team. And there's a process that you can go through to ensure that you're going to make a team out of this. And the difference between a team and a group is a team not only has a shared mission, something that we've all agreed that we're going to be doing on, but we end up trusting each other. You cannot create a team without trust. So that's going to be next month, August 16th, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And if you want to sign up for that one, very similar format to this, 45 minutes of talking and then questions and answers and all that kind of stuff with a little bit of sales in there too. So anyone that wants to sign up for things, you're welcome to. But we do like to provide free content to show that what we're doing is talking about. So thank you all for participating. I really appreciate the questions. Appreciate those that were willing to turn their cameras on. I know you're not normally asked to do that in these webinars when we around a bunch of strangers. So I really do appreciate that. And I want you to think about that question that I asked. When your camera was on, were you a little more intent on the message? And see how that might apply to your organization. All right. That's it for the presentation portion. Anyone that wants to stick around and have a conversation, I'm happy to be there with you for a few minutes. And so I'll just stay on for a bit. So if you want to unmute yourself and just chime in what you liked and what you didn't like was great. And thank you all for all the waves, people that are doing the waves. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Scott.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I love doing this. Okay, thank you all.